just from a background standpoint, I was 20 years in law practice, 21 years on the Supreme Court, last 10 as Chief Justice, and I spent about 30 years in the National Guard. Some of it was Army Reserve, but mostly in the National Guard. And so I put my notice out in November, and I started getting some calls and inquiries. And my intent was to teach in law school and work on access to justice issues and things like that. And I just, with all of the interest in it, and I felt there were some issues that for me I thought needed to be addressed for Mississippi to move forward in a positive way, and so I struggled with it over December, and my wife and I talked about it and I prayed about it. So we pulled the trigger in February after I retired, and that's basically the decision process. Well, I'll start with Chief Justice. That's 10 years as the Chief Executive of a branch of government. And in doing that, I was responsible for the appropriation for the judiciary, our rules, any type of statutory changes we needed in the legislature. I had to work with the House, work with the Senate, work with the governor. Obviously, supervising administratively 160 judges that we have, and all the support staff that goes with it, and all 82 counties, and the court clerks, and the administrative people, the 6,500 active practicing attorneys. And so I think that's great executive experience, and that no other candidate in the race has. Secondly is in my National Guard career, I was fortunate to be in command levels up to troop command, and was involved in civil emergencies. I had many hundreds of soldiers that were mobilized all over the world. So I'm aware with the issues you have with civil emergency, what's involved in call-ups, what the public needs to expect. I'm familiar with the mobilizations. I know what the families are faced with. I know about jobs and reentry and soldiers' benefits while they're gone. And I think as governor, of course, you're commander-in-chief of the Mississippi military. And I think no one has got the qualifications I have to step in that position. And I was in private law practice 20 years, and so I know what it's like to make a payroll, know what it's like to hire and fire people, know what it's like to keep an office going. So I think those sets of things, I think, uniquely qualify me and sets me apart from the field. If you want to, I've got a stool with 3 legs, and so I think that Mississippi can sit real well and comfortably on the 3 parts of my platform, and the first would be roads and bridges. Obviously, the legislature, the special session, did $250 million that they borrowed, and then they're expecting a eventual cash flow of around $200 million a year through year 10. Of course, year 10, the lottery goes back to education and that type of thing, and that's a good start. But the problem is that the 250 that was borrowed against the eventual $1 billion over 10 years, they put out requests for critical needs. They came in over $1 billion. In fact, if you look at Mississippi's bridges, we've got 1,900 that need to be repaired, 282 that are posted right now with restrictions. We've got 7 closed. That's state roads. That's not county, and the $1 billion over 10 years wouldn't even repair the bridges we have, much less maintain roads, and we haven't even gotten to coverage. We've got some critical needs. For instance, we need to finish the connector between the Gulfport Port and I-10, which is critical for evacuation purposes, for tourism, and so there's a lot of needs. And 1987 was the last highway program. And that's 32 years ago. Every other state in the South, if not in the nation, has embarked on a recent highway program because it's just time to do it. And Mississippi needs to step up and do something more progressive. Now, against that part of that money, the lottery, that's in conceptually, if you look at, if you put it in a category, at least as I do, is what we call a sin tax or something on alcohol or tobacco. That's always gone to the general fund, and we've got some critical education needs that I'll speak of in a second. And then the sales tax diversion on internet sales, well, that's absolutely taking money away from cities and counties, and the state shouldn't be taking money due to the general fund or states for that. So conceptually, I very much disagree with the way that was funded. And so obviously that comes back to, some people call it gas tax. I call it a user fee. President Ronald Reagan called it a user fee. Our user fee, 18 cents a gallon, is the lowest in the Southeast. To give you a comparison, Florida, that has toll roads everywhere, is 41 cents. So we don't need to do that, but that just shows you how far behind we are. And everyone needs to realize that the lottery and the sales tax, there's no out-of-state people involved in that, or maybe a little bit on the lottery, but up to 20% of the people that use our roads are from out of state, and they need to contribute to the road system just like everybody else. So there's ways that you can do it that would not be harmful to people. We looked at there was actually a tax swap on the table at the special session that was not taken up by the legislature. There's ways we can do it. I'm conservative, but on the other hand, we cannot sit here with our bridges failing and our roads in a very destructive situation. Those three legs that we talked about, industries, businesses, tourists, it's important for all three of those, and so it's time to do something with the roads. Now, secondly, on our health care, I'm a conservative, right to life, and access to health care is a right to life issue. There has to be some type of medical facility that can at least stabilize somebody within 30 miles of where everyone lives, and the examples I've seen are countless. I went to Poplarville. A friend of mine had a heart attack, and he sat across the table from me and he said, "Bill, if Poplarville hadn't stabilized me, I wouldn't have even made a helicopter ride to Forest General." So that's everywhere. Businesses are not going to locate if you don't have health care. We need it for our citizens. And so the big solution, the hospitals are struggling. We've got 4 hospitals that have already either closed, gone bankrupt, or sold. We've got 31 more on the hit list, half of the rural hospitals in the state. So the easy solution would be Medicaid reform. And I know that may be a bad word in some cases, but Governor Mike Pence did it 5 years ago in Indiana, and I've never heard anybody call him liberal. And the difference between Mississippi and Indiana, they've gotten $1 billion a year for the last 5 years that Mississippi hadn't. And so it means $1 billion a year to 115 hospitals and over 60,000 employees. So we've got to look at it, and there is a way to do it tax neutral. It won't cost the state of Mississippi a penny. Now there's people out there that say, "Oh, well, they may stop it, or this may happen." Well, if they do, we'll look at it then. But right now you've got, I think 35 states have modernized, if you will, and I don't think there's senators from 35 states are going to make any big changes to this monetarily. So I think it's going to be there. And then the third would be education. And the legislature, after 7 years, $1,500 a year, and I think at 50 million, 1,000, that's probably all we can do. But my commitment would be we do something every year till we reach the Southeastern Conference, and we don't wait until an election year to do that. And the reason is we're really on the precipice of an emergency. We've got 1,000 teacher vacancies across the state. 90% of the children educated in Mississippi are in public schools, and so we need to have an environment where our teachers can stay in Mississippi and make just as much as they do in Arkansas or Louisiana or Alabama and Tennessee. We just have to do that. We've got a lot of young people leaving, and the reason they leave should not be, "I can make $5,000 a year more in Alabama." So we've got to keep our best and our brightest, and I think there's no better way to do that than start right now and try to cut this teacher shortage off and try to have good schools. And those are the 3 things that you have. And when you have those 3 things going, I really believe we're going to have an economic revolution. I can give you some statistics on that. Mississippi has lost population 3 out of the last 4 years. Louisiana and Arkansas have both had Medicaid reform. They both have highway programs. So right now, in this same period, Louisiana has had 7 times the population growth we have and a surplus in the budget. Arkansas has had 5 times the population increase that we have, and they had a $200 million surplus last year. I think with a little tweaking, I think that we can see an economic revolution here, we can see jobs for Mississippians. I want to mention on the education level that having had town hall meetings and met with superintendents, I'm convinced that we need a vocational track in our high schools. The total focus of a high school education in Mississippi is preparatory to college. And someone that wants to be a mechanic can't be a mechanic when they graduate from high school in most places right now, and they sure don't need algebra to be a mechanic. And so I'd love to see a different track. I'd love to see our community colleges that are only funded on academic students now broaden to vocational and give them and empower them to get into the schools as early as the 9th grade. And those that are not interested in college, let's show them a pathway to a good job. Let's show them and find what their interest is, whether it's healthcare, if it's diesel mechanics, if it's in Vicksburg, if it's a pilot of a riverboat barge, which they have over there. Let's find what their passion is, and let's have jobs for our young people here. And I think all of these things, I think we would have a virtual economic revolution in Mississippi, and I think we could have growth. We could do some things that we need to do, and our people could stay, and everyone could have the opportunity for a good living. Well, it's going to be old-fashioned retail politics, so I'm trying to make all the public events I can make, particularly those that focus on political gatherings, and I'm trying to go to the coast, to North Mississippi. I'm blessed with good name recognition in the central part of the state, so my challenge is to carry this on also in the south and the north, and the campaign's going well. I'm full-time and a half on the road and on the phone, and my platform is being very, very favorably received by people I come into. I'm very, very encouraged with the response, and I think that handshake to handshake and word to word and footstep to footstep that we'll be successful August the 6th. Just overwhelmingly in support of it, overwhelmingly. And we get, obviously, not everybody out there is looking for me, and people have other candidates, but I'm going to say that the general response from the public is that they're glad that there's somebody that has some new ideas and wants to infuse some new blood and try to create some opportunities in Mississippi. So there's actually excitement about it. I'm just very, very encouraged by the public response. Well, my work career spanning over 42 years, 10 years as a head of a branch of government, my 30 years military experience, my the ideas that I have for transforming government, I think all of that should be attractive to a voter who wants someone that's ready to do the job first day on the job.